Few country music legends have endured as much heartbreak and hardship as Loretta Lynn. From her humble beginnings as a coal miner's daughter to becoming one of the most influential female singer-songwriters of all time, her life has been marked by both triumph and tragedy. Despite her incredible success, she has faced devastating personal losses, health struggles, and battles with addiction. Today we take a deep dive into the tragedy of Loretta. Lynn just keeps getting worse. Her journey to stardom, the heartbreaking events that shaped her life, and the incredible resilience that kept her going. Loretta Lynn, born Loretta Webb in 1932, came into the world in the rural mining town of Butcher Hollow, Kentucky. She was the second of what would eventually be 8 children, and in a home filled with so many mouths to feed, survival was a daily struggle. Her father, Melvin Ted Webb, worked long hours as a coal miner, barely scraping together enough to put food on the table. Despite his hard labor, the family remained deeply impoverished, and Loretta's childhood was marked by hardship and sacrifice. The Webb's small cabin was bursting at the seams, with 10 people packed into its modest rooms. Winters were especially brutal, with bitter cold seeping through the thin wooden walls. Without the money for proper insulation, Loretta's mother, Clara, came up with an unconventional solution. She covered the walls with pages from the Sears catalog, both as decoration and as a way to keep the cold at bay. While their home was filled with love, the poverty was suffocating. It's no surprise that young Loretta might have longed for a way out. And as fate would have it, her escape arrived sooner than expected. As a teenager, Loretta met Oliver Vanetta Lynn, better known as Doolittle or simply Do. Their paths crossed at a local pie social, a community gathering where young women baked pies that were then auctioned off to eager suitors. Loretta was instantly taken by the confident and charming Do, and despite his reputation as a troublemaker, she quickly fell for him. Others in town were less impressed. Many believed he was lazy, and there were persistent rumors that he was involved in bootlegging moonshine. But Loretta, young and eager for love, saw only the man who made her feel special. At just 15 years old, she married the 21-year-old Do, stepping into adulthood far earlier than she could have imagined. Marriage brought immediate changes. Loretta was pregnant within months, and Do soon announced that they were leaving Kentucky behind. He was determined to find better job opportunities, and so the young couple set out for Washington State, where he found work in the logging industry. The move marked the beginning of a new chapter, but their challenges were far from over. Their family grew rapidly. Betty Sue was born in 1948, followed by Jack Benny in 1949. Before long, they welcomed 2 more children, Ernest Ray and Clara Marie, in the early 1950s. Between raising 4 young children and managing a household, Loretta still found time for music. Her love for singing never faded, and she often performed for her children or at small local events. But while her talent was undeniable, there was one major obstacle standing in her way: her own husband. Do had a fiery temper, and their marriage was anything but peaceful. Their fights were intense and often physical. When angry, he would smash objects against the walls, sometimes even hurling glass jars in fits of rage. But Loretta was no shrinking violet. She later admitted that she never took his blows without retaliation. If he hit her once, she made sure to hit him back twice. One time, she even cracked a skillet full of creamed corn over his head. Their marriage was a battleground, fueled by passion and volatility. During one of their most intense fights, Loretta Lynn hit Do so hard that she actually heard the sound of his teeth hitting the floor. For a brief moment, she froze, terrified of what he might do next. She had seen his temper in action before, and she braced herself for what she was sure would be an explosive reaction. But instead of lashing out, Do did something completely unexpected. He laughed. That was the strange dynamic of their marriage. No matter how volatile their relationship became, it was never enough to make Loretta leave. And if there was one thing their marriage gave her, it was plenty of inspiration for her music. Still, behind her tough exterior, Loretta longed for someone she could trust, someone she could confide in without fear. She was about to find that person, and it would change her life forever. Loretta's stormy marriage was no secret in country music circles, but in her autobiography she revealed what she considered Du's most heartless betrayal. Over the years she had endured his drinking, his cheating, and his violent outbursts, but nothing compared to the moment when, in the middle of labor, he told her he was leaving her. She was lying in a hospital bed, bringing their child into the world, while he was off chasing another woman. The pain of that moment never left her. Yet, for all the ways he hurt her, Du was also the one who pushed her to pursue her dreams. He saw a fire in Loretta that she didn't even see in herself. She had always loved to sing, but she never believed she was good enough to make something of it. Determined to prove her wrong, Du walked into a Sears store one day and bought her a $17 guitar. It wasn't much, but it was a start. From that moment on, he became her biggest and most relentless supporter. Over and over again, he told her that she was as talented as any country star on the radio. Loretta struggled to believe him. After all, she was just a coal miner's daughter from Butcher Hollow. But Du wasn't about to let her give up before she even tried. When a televised talent show in Tacoma, Washington came up, Du saw it as the perfect opportunity to prove his point. He convinced Loretta to enter, despite her nerves. Standing on that stage, her heart raced as she gripped the microphone. But the moment she started to sing, something changed. The crowd quieted, the judges leaned in, and for the first time, Loretta felt like maybe, just maybe, she belonged there. When the competition ended, Loretta had won. But her prize was far from the big break she had hoped for. It was nothing more than a wristwatch. No record deal, no cash prize, just a small token that barely reflected the magnitude of what she had accomplished. But as it turned out, the wristwatch wasn't the real reward. Sitting in the audience that day was a Canadian businessman named Norm Burley. Burley was so captivated by Loretta Lynn's voice that he took it upon himself to launch her career. He arranged for her to travel to Hollywood for a recording session and even covered all the expenses for both her and Du. When he finally heard the finished track, he was so impressed that he decided to create an entire record label just for her. Zero Records. But Loretta and Du weren't the type to sit back and leave everything in someone else's hands. They had their own plan to make sure her music reached as many ears as possible. While Burley was in Vancouver, laying the foundation for Zero Records, Loretta and Du were hard at work in the U.S., doing everything they could to promote her music. Du took charge, mailing out 3,500 copies of I'm a Honky Tonk Girl, along with a promotional photo of Loretta to radio stations across the country. It was an ambitious effort, but when the responses started coming in, they were hit with a harsh reality. There were no responses at all. Not a single station had reached out. They needed a new plan, and this time they were going to do things differently. Determined not to let their hard work go to waste, Loretta and Du took matters into their own hands. Instead of relying on the mail, they loaded up their car with records and hit the road, traveling from town to town to personally deliver I'm a Honky Tonk Girl to radio stations. Money was tight, so staying in hotels wasn't an option. They slept in their car, ate cheap sandwiches in public parks, and kept pushing forward, determined to get Loretta's music on the air. Their journey eventually led them to Nashville, Tennessee, and that's where everything changed. When they arrived in Nashville, they were met with a stunning revelation. I'm a Honky Tonk Girl had taken off. The song had climbed all the way to number 1, 14 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart, an incredible feat for an independent artist's debut single. Loretta had officially broken into country music, and now that people had heard her voice, they wanted more. As soon as the song gained traction, invitations started pouring in. First, she was asked to join the Wilburn Brothers on tour, a major opportunity for any up-and-coming artist. But the next invitation was even bigger. Country music legend Ernest Tubb invited her to perform on his radio show, Midnight Jamboree. The Grand Ole Opry was the pinnacle of country music, the longest-running radio broadcast in American history, and a dream stage for any aspiring country singer. When Loretta Lynn received the call to perform, she knew this was her biggest break yet. The Opry had launched the careers of countless country stars, and the exposure was unmatched. With her future looking brighter than ever, she now faced a new challenge: writing her own songs. In 1961, Loretta had another career-defining moment, the chance to sing "I Fall to Pieces, Live" on the radio. The song had been made famous by her idol Patsy Cline, who at the time was recovering from a car accident. As Cline lay in bed listening, she was instantly taken with Loretta's performance. So much so that she sent her husband to the studio with an invitation. She wanted to meet the singer who had done her song justice. The two women met soon after, and their connection was immediate. Loretta and Patsy became inseparable. Cline took the younger singer under her wing, mentoring her in both music and life. She even helped Loretta with practical things, like paying for drapes to furnish her home. But perhaps the strangest sign of their close bond was an unexpected gift. Cline gave Loretta some of her old underwear. Their friendship was so legendary that it later inspired the TV movie Patsy and Loretta. After signing with the Wilburn Brothers Publishing Company, Loretta's career gained even more momentum. They helped her transition from Zero Records to the far more powerful Decca Records, a move that should have secured her artistic freedom. However, there was a catch, one that devastated her. She discovered that the publishing company had legally claimed ownership of all her songs. For the next 30 years, she fought tirelessly to regain control of her own music, but the battle was long and exhausting. Despite the legal struggles, Loretta's career continued to thrive at Decca. Ironically, her first single with the label was titled Success, and it lived up to its name, spending an impressive 16 weeks on the Billboard Hot Country Western and Sides chart. Hit after hit followed, making her one of country music's fastest rising stars. But there was one issue. She wasn't writing these songs herself. That was about to change. Loretta Lynn's friendship with Patsy Cline was nothing short of legendary, but from the very beginning it carried an eerie sense of inevitability. Cline had once confided in Loretta that she didn't believe she would live a long life, a chilling premonition that tragically came true in 1963. That year, Cline died in a devastating plane crash, leaving Loretta heartbroken. In a single night, she lost not only her best friend, but also her mentor. However, the lessons Cline had imparted stayed with her, and with that wisdom, Loretta was ready to take on the country music world on her own. It wasn't until after she gave birth to twins that Loretta saw one of her own songs become a hit. Dear Uncle Sam was a deeply emotional track that told the story of a woman saying goodbye to her husband as he left to fight in Vietnam. At the time, country music had largely avoided tackling such serious and politically charged subjects, making the song a groundbreaking moment in her career. Audiences were captivated by its raw emotion, and Dear Uncle Sam became a major success. But something even bigger was just around the corner. By the time Loretta was 34, something unexpected happened. She became a grandmother. Just 2 years after having her twins, her eldest daughter, Betty Sue, gave birth to her first child in 1966. With her family growing rapidly, Loretta realized she needed a much bigger place to call home. That same year, Loretta and Dew came across a property that immediately caught their attention, a sprawling ranch that seemed like the perfect place to raise their family. But there was one unusual catch. Purchasing the ranch also meant buying the entire town of Hurricane Mills, Tennessee. It was a bold decision, but the Lynns didn't hesitate. They went all in and became the proud owners of not just a home, but an entire town. Now firmly established in both her personal life and career, Loretta had the confidence to speak her mind, and her words would soon lead to one of her most iconic songs. One night, while backstage before a performance, she met a distraught woman who was afraid she was losing her husband to another woman. Without hesitation, Loretta told her, "Honey, she ain't woman enough to take your man." The phrase stuck in her mind, and when she found a quiet moment, she sat down and turned it into a song, one that would change the course of her career forever. Loretta Lynn poured her emotions into "You Ain't Woman Enough to Take My Man," and the song became a runaway success. Not only did it resonate with country music fans, but it also earned her a historic milestone. She became the first female country artist to write a #1 hit. It seemed as though there was nothing she couldn't do. But despite all her professional achievements, there was still one battle she couldn't win: her troubled marriage. Dew had been unfaithful for years, but one affair in particular infuriated Loretta. Determined to confront the woman, she wrote a letter to her husband's mistress, making it clear she wasn't going to back down. When Dew found out, he was furious. Instead of apologizing, he coldly told Loretta to stay out of his business. Then, in a final gut-wrenching blow, he told her he didn't love her anymore. The pain cut deep, but instead of breaking down, Loretta did what she did best. She turned her heartbreak into a song. In 1968, she released Fist City, a fiery warning to any woman who dared to go after her husband. The lyrics made one thing crystal clear: if any mistress crossed the line, Loretta was ready to fight for what was hers. Bold and unapologetic, the song was unlike anything country radio had ever heard. But it didn't take long for the backlash to roll in. While some critics praised Fist City, with one calling it the greatest song title of all time, others found its aggressive tone too much to handle. Radio stations across the country refused to play it, effectively banning the track. Loretta had always been open about the hardships of her marriage, but now her honesty was proving too intense for mainstream audiences. What people didn't realize was that her real life was even harder than her lyrics suggested. Just a year after Fist City, controversy struck again, this time over an entire album. In 1969, Loretta released Your Squaw Is on the Warpath, an album that reflected the language and attitudes of its era. Though Loretta had Cherokee ancestry, the title alone sparked some debate. However, that wasn't what led to the album's recall. The real issue came from an unexpected source: the Salem Cigarette Company. One of the songs on the album bore a melody that sounded suspiciously similar to a jingle from their advertisements. Faced with legal pressure, the record label recalled the album, later re-releasing it with the questionable track removed. Dew's infidelities were not the only thing Loretta Lynn had to endure. He also struggled with alcoholism. When she returned home after a tour, she never knew what state she would find him in. Some days she admitted she dreaded going back at all, not knowing whether she'd face a drunken outburst or something even worse. For the sake of her children, she put on a brave face, but the emotional toll of living in such an unstable environment weighed heavily on her. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get any harder, more heartache was on the horizon. When Loretta Lynn recorded her passionate cover of Stand By Your Man, it was clear that she was standing by her husband despite everything. The song, which had become a classic in its own right, seemed to mirror Loretta's own struggles, with loyalty and love, even in the face of immense personal pain. The 1970s proved to be Loretta's decade. She amassed a massive fan base, especially among women, and became an icon in country music. Her popularity soared so high that Procter & Gamble hired her to endorse their widely recognized product, Crisco shortening. By the end of the decade, the Academy of Country Music named her Artist of the Decade, making her the first woman ever to receive this honor. At the height of her career, Loretta was not only a country legend but also a Hollywood sensation. In 1980, as Loretta's fame continued to rise, it was announced that a movie about her life was in the works. She was thrilled about the project and, in an enthusiastic interview, revealed that Sissy Spacek, star of Carrie, would be playing her in Coal Miner's Daughter. There was just one problem. Spacek hadn't agreed to the role yet. Spacek had been hesitant about taking on the role of Loretta Lynn, and even tried to dissuade the producers by insisting she would sing all of the songs herself. One major issue was that she didn't care for country music at all. Loretta desperately wanted Spacek to take the part, so the pressure was on. Eventually, Spacek made her decision in a rather unconventional way. Loretta Lynn personally chose Sissy Spacek for the lead role in Coal Miner's Daughter, fully believing that Spacek was the only one who could do her story justice. However, not everyone agreed. In fact, one director was so against casting Spacek that the producers ultimately fired him rather than reconsider Lynn's choice. Still, despite this strong backing, Spacek hesitated. Taking on the role of a real-life legend was a daunting task, and she wasn't sure if she was the right fit. Then something uncanny happened. While driving one day, she switched on the car radio, and suddenly, Coal Miner's Daughter, the very song that had inspired the film, started playing. But what made this moment truly surreal was that she had been listening to a classical music station, where country songs like that simply wouldn't be played. It felt like a sign, an unmistakable answer to the question she had been struggling with. At that moment, all her doubts vanished. She said yes to the role, fully committing herself to bringing Loretta Lynn's life to the big screen. And her approach to preparing for the part was anything but ordinary. Once Spacek agreed to play Lynn, she became completely immersed in the country singer's world. Determined to replicate every nuance of her personality, she followed Lynn everywhere, on stage, backstage, at home, and even in private settings. She wasn't just studying Lynn's public persona. She was absorbing her every gesture, the rhythm of her speech, the way she moved, laughed, and carried herself in everyday life. It became almost an obsession, and over time, Spacek molded herself into the country music star so convincingly that even those closest to Lynn were astonished. However, she wasn't the only actor who delivered a stunning transformation in the film. During one of Loretta Lynn's visits to the set, she experienced something so eerie it nearly knocked her off her feet. As she walked through the production area, she suddenly stopped, her face going pale. She was convinced she had just seen a ghost, but it wasn't a spirit haunting the set. It was Levon Helm, the actor portraying her father. The makeup and costume team had done such an extraordinary job transforming him into Ted Webb, Lynn's real father, that for a moment she believed she was staring at a man who had long since passed away. The shock was overwhelming, and she nearly fainted. While Helm's resemblance to her father was uncanny, not every casting choice won Lynn's approval. Her husband, Dew, had a particularly strong reaction when he found out that Tommy Lee Jones had been chosen to play him. From the moment he heard Jones was cast, Dew refused to meet him. Whether he didn't think Jones could capture his personality or just disliked the idea of someone portraying him on screen, he wanted nothing to do with the actor. This didn't sit well with Jones, who decided to take drastic measures to prove himself. He went fully method, diving headfirst into Dew's rough and rebellious lifestyle. He got his hands on some moonshine, got completely drunk, and then recklessly drove a Jeep through town. His wild antics inevitably caught the attention of the local sheriff, who promptly arrested him. But Jones wasn't done making an impression. When he resisted arrest, the officers responded by roughing him up at the station. Strangely enough, this act of sheer recklessness ended up winning Due's respect. Seeing Jones's willingness to throw himself into the role, literally, Due finally approved of him, and the two men eventually became friends. When Coal Miner's Daughter was finally released in theaters, it took audiences by storm. It wasn't just a success, it was a phenomenon. The film debuted at #1 at the box office, raking in an impressive $3.6 million in its opening weekend, a massive feat at the time. Critics praised its authenticity, the powerhouse performances, and the emotional depth of the storytelling. As award season rolled around, Coal Miner's Daughter proved to be a heavyweight contender, earning 7 Academy Award nominations and 4 Golden Globe nominations. Sissy Spacek's breathtaking performance as Loretta Lynn won her both the Oscar and the Golden Globe for Best Actress, along with numerous other accolades. In 1981, motocross promoter Dave Coombs stumbled upon Loretta Lynn's ranch and immediately saw potential. He had been searching for a remote and unique location to host a national motocross race, and Lynn's sprawling property seemed like the perfect fit. When he approached her with the idea, she didn't hesitate. She gave her full support. From that moment on, the annual event became a tradition, drawing motocross enthusiasts from all over the country to Lynn's ranch every year. But while the ranch became a place of excitement and competition, it also held deep sorrow for Lynn. In July 1984, tragedy struck when her son Jack Benny set out on horseback for a routine ride around the ranch. When he reached Duck River, he decided to cross it while still on his horse. What happened next would be one of the most devastating moments of Lynn's life. Jack Benny drowned in the river that day. The loss was already unbearable, but Lynn wasn't even home at the time. She was facing her own health crisis. Unbeknownst to most, Lynn had been hospitalized when the accident occurred. The demands of her relentless touring schedule had pushed her to the brink of exhaustion, and doctors had advised her to rest and recover. But as she lay in a hospital bed trying to regain her strength, she received the heartbreaking news of her son's passing. She barely had time to process her grief before life dealt her another series of painful blows. As the years went on, Lynn found herself spending even more time in hospitals, not for herself but for her husband, Due. His years of hard living had finally caught up with him, and in 1992, he underwent heart surgery. But that was just the beginning. His ongoing battle with diabetes led to an even more devastating development. His doctors determined that both of his legs would have to be amputated. Despite having a flourishing career and countless commitments, Lynn didn't think twice about what she needed to do. She put everything on hold to care for her husband, prioritizing his health above all else. Unfortunately, even her unwavering devotion couldn't change the inevitable. Just 5 days shy of his 70th birthday, Due passed away. Their marriage had been filled with love, turbulence, and everything in between, but there was no denying the impact he had on her life. Lynn was the first to admit that without Due, her music career might never have happened. Now, after decades of being by his side, she found herself completely alone. The adjustment was painful, and the grief was overwhelming. But Lynn knew herself well enough to understand that she needed an outlet. She turned to the one thing that had always been there for her: music. Reflecting on her life, Lynn recognized that from the moment she got married as a teenager, she had always been under someone's authority, first her father, then her husband. But despite the struggles they faced, she missed Due terribly. For years after his passing, she often thought she saw him in fleeting moments, only to realize he was gone. In an effort to cope with the loss, she channeled her emotions into songwriting. One of the most poignant songs to come out of this period was I Can't Hear the Music, a heartfelt tribute to the man who had shaped so much of her life. But rather than retreat into solitude, Lynn sought new ways to keep her spirit young, and she found an unexpected way to do just that. At an age when most people would be considering retirement, Lynn was still pushing boundaries. In 2004, at 72 years old, she joined forces with Jack White of the White Stripes to produce her 42nd studio album, Van Leer Rose. The collaboration was unconventional, bridging generations and musical styles, but it proved to be a stroke of genius. The album reached number 2 on the Billboard Top Country Albums chart, proving that Lynn's artistry remained as powerful as ever. Her influence on younger musicians was undeniable, and they were more than ready to honor her legacy in a big way. Though she had never been deeply involved in politics, her support had largely gone to Republican figures like Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, both George Bushes, and later, Donald Trump. However, it was a Democratic president who presented her with one of the nation's highest honors. In 2013, Barack Obama awarded Loretta Lynn the Presidential Medal of Freedom, recognizing her extraordinary contributions to American music and culture. It was a moment of immense pride, a testament to her incredible journey from a poor coal miner's daughter to a country music legend. But even as she received these accolades, time was catching up with her. Like her husband before her, Lynn faced her own share of health challenges in her later years. She battled pneumonia, suffered a stroke, and was ultimately forced to cancel her 2018 tour. Even as she worked on her final album, Wouldn't It Be Great? Another setback occurred. She broke her hip. Her strength and resilience carried her through decades of hardship. But on October 4th, 2022, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. They laid her to rest on the same ranch where she had experienced both triumph and heartbreak, right beside her beloved Dew. Though she was gone, Lynn's legacy lived on in more ways than one. She and Dew had 6 children, and some of them followed in her musical footsteps. Her youngest twin daughters, Peggy and Patsy, formed a country duo in the 1990s called the Lynns, a name that carried deep meaning. They had been born a year after Lynn lost her dear friend and mentor, Patsy Cline, in a tragic plane crash, and she had named one of them in Cline's honor. The twins proved their talent, earning CMA Award nominations for Vocal Duo of the Year in both 1998 and 1999. Decades later, in 2024, another generation of Lynn's family stepped into the spotlight. Her granddaughter, Patsy's daughter, auditioned for American Idol, proving that the Lynn musical legacy was far from over. Loretta Lynn's life has been filled with both extraordinary achievements and unimaginable heartbreak. Yet through every tragedy, she has continued to inspire generations with her music, strength, and perseverance. Even in her later years, she remained a powerful voice in country music. What's your favorite memory or song from Loretta Lynn? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.